Hello, everyone. I am super excited to be introducing and moderating just a panel on a topic that is deeply near and dear to my heart, which is research operations first, scaling for success. I've got three tremendous luminaries in the field with amazing ideas in this realm. So I'm very excited to introduce all of them, and then we will kick things off. So I have joining me the tremendous Gaby Verderber. She's manager of UX operations at Appfolio. I've got Liza Pemstein, the research operations manager at Clever, and I've got Brad Origo, head of research at Auth0. All three people with amazing experiences going research operations first as a research practice. So I am going to go ahead and ask each panelist to just introduce themselves very quickly, and then we're going to jump straight into things. So Gaby, why don't you kick us off with just a line or two about yourself?
Hello, my name is Gaby. My pronouns are she and they. Jane Yardy said what I do, so I love operations.
All right, Liza, how about you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Liza Pemstein, Research Ops Manager at Clever. I also love operationalizing things and making things more efficient and easier to find.
Amazing. Last but not least, Brad, welcome.
Yeah, hi again. Gave a talk earlier, so hopefully this is the second time most of you are seeing me today. But yeah, I lead the research team at Auth0. Started that team 3 years ago when I joined the company. I'm also a modern dancer, so I have 2 full careers. We can talk more about it later. Yeah, research ops. I realized I was a computer science and psychology double major. I'm like, of course, I'm like an engineer that's applying that stuff to operations or to research. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense on how I wound up here.
Amazing. Well, let's get started. We're just going to go around and have each of you describe why your practice decided to go ReOps first. So tell us just a little bit about how that decision came about. And I'm happy to pick, or if folks are like excited, they can jump in. So. All right, I'm picking. Gaby, how'd you get started?
It's kind of interesting. I would say we definitely did not start with ReOps first, which means maybe you could argue that we aren't ReOps first, but Appfolio has been around for about 16 years, and the first researcher wasn't even hired until 6 years ago. And I think the operations practice started about 3 years ago. But the reason we focus so heavily on operations at this point is because of the scale we're working with. We have over 100 designers, researchers, and product managers, and they're all doing research all the time, every day. And it is a lot. If you were in Brad's talk earlier, I think we definitely had that oh shit moment that he mentioned of like, what is everybody doing? Oh, did we just talk to the same person 3 times this week? So in all of our things, we really focus on making the future of it sustainable, scalable, all of those things to support this large democratized team.
Amazing. Brad, tell us a little bit about why Auth0 went this route.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a hypothesis that I had. It was just like, I've been part of teams that had a bunch of researchers and tried to add ops. I've been at teams that have tried to scale without operations. And I was like, what if we do this first? And really the situation that we were walking into, when I joined Auth0 is that we had a bunch of different people doing research already. We had, all these different teams doing all this research. And I was just like, well, there's one of me, there's about 15 different product teams. Like, I can't possibly do all the research to support these teams. So why don't I instead empower the people to do that with all the guardrails and everything that we've all talked about and heard about today? But yeah, like that was the big selling point. It's like if I can take these 15 teams and they do a quarter as much research as I would do, the overall volume is still going to increase.
Amazing. I love it. And Liza, how did Clever go re-ops first?
Yeah, so we don't have dedicated researchers. And if you go to my talk later, you'll hear all about that. But we have designers and PMs who are doing research. So we have a healthy, and in research, it's, I listen to Zoe's talk. So we're doing a lot of learning. Everyone's learning. We're having these conversations, but it was pretty messy. And so there was a real need to sort of streamline how we do it and not talk to the same people or spam people's inboxes. Like, how much money are we giving away? And thank you. And send, like, there were lots of pieces that were sort of just floating around in the ether of Clever. And we needed to kind of like bring them in and put them in a place so that people could continue having these conversations, but not have to reinvent the wheel every time. Onboarding was a struggle because, we have tenured folks who kind of know how to find people and talk to them. But then we had new people coming on just being like, I have to talk to people now. Where are they? So there was a real need for laying it out, setting up processes, and making it easier.
Absolutely. That is, I think there's so many places to go from here. But I think one thing all three of you mentioned is this idea that there was so much in-flight stuff happening. There was a lot that really needed structure and guardrails. When you come into a situation where you want to support that without kind of squashing people's desire to do research or worrying that process is going to get in their way, how did you tackle that? Like, how did you get buy-in with these teams and help them understand what research operations was going to do for them?
I can jump in. I think it was a lot about really asking people how they were working. And like I think we've heard a few times like the listening tour. I was a designer before I was in operations at the same company. So I knew my problems, but we did a lot of talking to the PMs, the designers, and the researchers, like, what are you doing with it? What are the parts that you hate? And that was where we started. And that's why everybody loves me at my job, because I made the things they hate easier.
Yeah. Oh, Brad, sorry. I would totally agree with Gaby. It is like when I first came on, I would just sort of talk to people and say, okay, how are you doing research? And then I'd be like, wow, that seems hard. And that's not what that person told me. And it's like, wait, you do what? Everyone's doing that? And it's everyone, like, really? Okay, wait, hold on. So it was a lot of just asking the questions and listening and then hearing kind of the emotion and the pain behind many different steps.
Yeah, I think what I was going to add is you kind of have to meet people where they're at, right? I would love to come in and say, great, here's the whole process. Here's all the things you need to do. I should show you the evolution of our process diagram because if you go back through the blog post that I've written, it's there. And it was super detailed and super complicated. And everyone who wasn't a researcher looked at that and they're just like, nope. Like I'm noping out of this so hard. So you have to understand like what's their level of understanding, what's their level of familiarity, how are they currently working, and how do we fix it for them without completely nuking what they're doing, adding a bunch of overhead, right? It's like it's a balance point. It's kind of a struggle, honestly, because I would love to say we came in and changed everything, and some things certainly are different, but at the same time it's we're fitting into their processes as much as they're fitting into ours.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about those moments of like what has changed as you have kind of established these processes in partnership with these organizations and really like being mindful about what what is already happening. Talk to me a little bit about the shift in how research, like where research was when you first started, and then where's research now that you've been doing an ops first practice for a while?
I think there's sort of three phases here for me because we're never done, right? Ops is you're never done with your job. But if we think about where research was before I got here, sort of the like intermediate phase and what we're moving into and where we are now, I mean, I think the level of understanding, the level of maturity, the level that people have embraced research has really, really shifted. And that's, the work that me and my team have been doing. That's honestly part of it is just a little bit of turnover in headcount, where you have people that are used to the way that they used to do things. Some of those folks are no longer around. So we have newer designers, newer PMs coming in where they onboard into this process. And they're just like, oh, great, this is how it works. Sometimes longevity is on your side. No. We're building a consistent process here. We're building our own participant panel so that we can reach out to folks, and we have a ready group of individuals, of users. We're building our partnerships with our customer success team if we want to talk to enterprise customers, or the sales team to get some of those leads. So we really built some of those things out. But there was definitely a year and a half, I would say, of people like getting used to it, sort of, okay, that we used to do it that way and now we're doing it this way. And are we talking to the same 5 customers? Oh no. Like, we had to go through that process and that evolution. And now it's, aside from what we're doing from a research function, the self-serve, the ops part, the democratized part, like, people kind of get it now. And it's actually really cool for me to see people submit a research plan when they submit an insights request to say, hey, we looked at the template, we took our first stab at it. What do you think? Like, that's a fundamental difference from someone submitting a request that's like, we want to do docs research. And you're just like, cool, help me out here.
Awesome. Gaby, Liza, how about you two? What's changed in the time since you really started instituting research operations?
We're playing microphone chicken again. I think that the biggest changes in the accessibility of the research. So my first big project was research repository, because we have 100+ people doing research. Where does that research live? In all of the different places, in so many different programs, and just being like, all right, this is where you start when you start a research project. And that, it hasn't changed how we're doing the research, but it changes the ability for people to see what other research is going on. It changes the ability for people to make connections, and hopefully reduces the duplicative research, at least. Hopefully. I don't have any data that supports that, but I like to think that's what it's doing.
I would say one of the biggest changes is around kind of general buy-in and excitement around research. So, as I said before, people have always been talking and learning, and we have our different product teams, and then the designer and the PM will do the research, and maybe we have an engineer note taking, and so like it's within, and there's excitement within each team, but no one really knew who we were talking to across the company. And there was, I think, in some cases, kind of a lack of confidence in going out there and just doing it. So, sort of being the like beacon of hope that you can do it, and someone that you can turn to and talk. People will throw meetings on my calendar, and I made it a point, and I continue to make it a point to be like as available as I can to answer sort of right away, just because I love the momentum and I love the conversations around research that I've gotten to have with people who are, maybe they've had more experience, or they have no experience, or they were at a past company adjacent to lots of experience. And so, the like confidence and excitement around it is, I can see it, it's really ramping up, and sharing out what people are doing now. I've started sharing out these research digests, is what I call it. And there's so much fun conversation, like, hey, I saw that you're talking to these people this week. Like, do you mind if I take a look at your notes? Or, next week I'm talking to people that are like that, but there's a lot of collaboration. And so there's just like a really fun energy around research now that there's someone that's sort of making it official.
I love it. I love a research digest. That was like probably the most impactful work I did in my like 4.5 years at Dropbox. It's like, here's everything that happened this week. So good. I saw some big nods when we got to the point about confidence. So, Brad, Gaby, tell me a little bit about it. The visual cues are indicating to me that this has been a truth for you two as well. Talk to us a little bit about like how you have instilled that confidence, where you see it really starting to have impact, and what you've done to kind of proactively build confidence for folks.
Yeah, I mean, I love this topic because it applies just as equally to people who do research as it does to researchers, right? Like when people are like, how have you taught people to do usability studies? I'm like, the same way you would teach, a student or, your associate researcher, whatever, like it's the same thing. So like, I'm sure I've been quoted by being like, I can teach anyone how to, run an interview or do a usability study. It's really not that hard. That's not to say our jobs are easy, but there's like nuance and there's things. So we do a lot of education. We have these like monthly, research deep dives where we'll pick a topic, and I usually force people to practice whatever that method is. We'll do like a 5-minute workshop at the end. I'm like, all right, pair off. One of you is facilitating, one of you is participating. You're going to practice a card sort right now. Like, just give people the reps so that they can do it in a safe environment. Give people give them the recordings, right? Hey, look at everyone else. Look at how this person ran it. It's the type of thing where, yeah, just giving people that familiarity, giving them that experience, offering to, like, it's rare that I have to do this, but sometimes I'm like, do you want me to run your first session with you so that you can sit and observe? You don't have to panic. You don't have to worry about, saying something wrong. It's like, yeah, we can do that, right? We have people, myself and other folks on the team that have enough experience. So it's interesting. I mean, I very much appreciate that folks are hesitant and like worried and cautious about doing research, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, the hard parts aren't facilitating. The hard parts are picking the right method and the right audience and writing your script and reducing bias and doing the analysis. That's the part that's difficult about our job. Asking questions, maybe having to improv a little bit, building rapport. Sure, there's an art to that, and some people are naturally better at it than others, but I don't think that's the hard part that everyone needs to worry about.
I love it. I love the give people the reps framing on that as well. Possibly because I'm a weightlifter, and so like anything tied to that world is big for me. Gaby, how about you? What have you seen in the realm of confidence?
It's interesting because I think like from our perspective, so we have like a 6-week onboarding program for designers, researchers, and PMs, and part of that is pairing and shadowing other designers, researchers, and PMs. And so I think in terms of confidence of like the ability to run a script or have a conversation, they see it happening all the time. So I think that does build up. But I do echo what Brad said about like, let's run it together the first time. Let's practice it. So if you're a little bit nervous about your very first interview, but where we really have built confidence is in like following the the steps for getting participants and making sure that you're contacting them correctly and all of these things. And it sounds kind of oversimplified, but like just documenting what people are supposed to do really helps give that confidence, because it's like, okay, the first time we're going to walk through it together, but when you do it in the future, you're not going to have to remember, what did I do 2 months ago to get these customers? You can look through the documentation, and then if you have a couple questions, it's really easy. It's much easier than being like, I'm starting from scratch every single time because I can't remember. I only do it every 2 months, and then I have all my calls lined up, and then I have to react to that information. So I think that's where the confidence element really comes in for us.
I love it. Every time I start a new job as a researcher, I'm like, how do I write an interview guide again? Been doing this for a decade, every single time. So I love that. As like, documentation isn't just about guardrails. It is about instilling confidence and a sense that like people can do this themselves. I love that. Well, I like to hear about things that have gone poorly because I talk a lot about the things that have gone poorly in my career, and those are some of my favorite stories. So tell me, each of you, Let's pick one thing that you would do differently, or one moment of just like where you were like, I tried and that did not pan out. And kind of what was a stumbling block you encountered as you've been setting up research operations at your organizations? And how did you move past that or learn from that moment?
There are so many options. There are so many things that we could have done better. I'm gonna have to think about that for a second still. Hold on.
I can throw in one that's not from my current environment. This was okay. All right, this is my first job out of college. So, I should have known I was destined for operations because my first job. I'm the youngest person in the room. People keep asking me if I'm actually over 21. Like on my birthday, someone was like, "Are you allowed to drink alcohol?" It was great. It was a very good work environment. I promise. Anyway, the point of answering your question is that, I was the youngest person there and I was like, why are we creating these new things? We were a consultancy, so we were working with clients. So we would do the same processes at the beginning for most clients. Like, we'd do a analysis, like a website audit and personas and all of this stuff. And I was like, but nobody knows where to find any of it. And I created a SharePoint, and it was a SharePoint website, and literally nobody other than me could use it because they didn't know how to find anything because it was only for my brain. And so isn't like my current thing, but this is like a huge learning of me is like, I need to ask how other people look for things. I need to know what they need. If I build it only for me, sure, that'll help me. But then everybody's going to ask me where to find the templates because they can't find them because it's in a SharePoint website that is very hard to navigate.
I'm having a lot of flashbacks to the first repository I ever built.
It's funny to hear Gaby say that because I was like, we've reorganized our Confluence space probably 3 or 4 times. We've been like, what do you mean you can't find the guides? I think the sort of like my take on that is I'm the type of person that will go seek something out, will read the documentation, like assuming that people do that. We've made so many, this happens still. People are like, oh, we want to go like do some customer calls. I'm like, great, here's our continuous research guide. And they're like, our what? I'm like, yeah, did you read it? No, you haven't. No one reads the docs, right? Like no one pays any attention to any of the, like, as Gaby said earlier, like it's great to have that checklist and have that documentation, but I think I just assume that, hey, if you have a question, you're going to try to go answer it before you charge forth or before you ask. Like my favorite thing to do on Slack is someone asks me a question and I just send them like a Confluence page. I've actually trained my manager to search first before asking me because he got so mad all the times he would ask me a question. I'm like, oh, you mean this? Oh, yeah, I already thought about that. I anticipated this need and we already have a document that explains how to do this or where to find it. So yeah, we still have that struggle where it's like, I thought we were very clear. I thought it was very like obvious that we have this documentation, we have recordings on how to do these things, like we have all this stuff, and people just don't go look for it. So one of the things we're trying to do to work past that is every opportunity you get, whether it be in Slack, in a monthly all hands meeting, in a one-on-one with a PM, like just keep reiterating these things, right? Like I say force. So I started out as the only ops person and I would meet with every single PM and designer pair every single month just to be top of mind and get updates from them and share some news for us. And I'm like, now my ops lead has to do that. It's like, you have to meet with every single person every single month. They're going to sometimes say they don't have anything to share. You're like, that's cool. Give me 10 minutes. I'll just give you some updates on what's new for us. Like keeping those things top of mind for all of your people who do research, it's super important because otherwise, yeah, they may not do this for a month or 2 or 3, and they're going to forget things and they're not going to go look for it. Like just be top of mind as much as you can for folks and find different ways to share that information.
Yeah. I think, we talked a little bit about like documentation creates confidence, but I think the corollary of that for me is knowing that there is a human you can ask is a necessary but not sufficient condition to successfully going ops first. Liza, how about you? Tell us a little bit about some learning moments you've had setting up your practice.
Yeah. I would also kind of just second everything that's already been said about documentation. So yeah, it's all in Confluence. I've rearranged it several times, different orientations. We're like, how many child pages can you have to make it clearer? Send it over, but I also do welcome someone just pinging me on Slack. And then I go, hey, try this. And if it doesn't work, let me know. Or, there's a whole onboarding deck. So we did adopt. Great question. They are we love them. But I do, I created a whole onboarding guide with looms, just me talking to myself, like, please watch these. It is helpful, but then there does come a time where they just want to talk to the person. Like, I get that. Sometimes I hop on a call and I want to talk to a support person because I need a human in this world. But I think also something that I learned was like, in this case, I was the expert for all intents and purposes for these people who kind of needed help and needed some guidance. So they didn't really know what they didn't know. And so in the beginning, it felt like more of a suggestion or like dangling a thing. And now we have this. I'm not trying, change management is really important. And I think it's so, there are ways to go about it. But then as I sort of kept going in this role, I was like, okay, maybe there's more room to be a little pushier and a little bit more prescriptive and a little bit more, this is how we're doing it. Chat with me. Like, I'm still available, but like, this is the steps, these are the processes. And that has just been welcomed. They love the research plan template. They can just do, it's like these things were welcome. They just didn't know. It was a little bit scary. And so I just kind of needed to be confident in being a comfort rather than just sort of disorienting them.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. Is that being opinionated is a gift that you can give your organization when you are in an operations or a service role like research. It's like this that is useful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Liza. I'm always curious. So it sounds like all of you kind of came into situations where there was a mandate for research. So, like, there's an understanding that research is valuable. I'd love to know a little bit about the specific ways in which you talk about research operations to help both like new people as you're onboarding them, but also people in leadership roles like executives, helping them understand research operations as a practice, since it is a relatively young field compared to software engineering, for example. Or at least it's new that we have titles for it, is what I will say about that. It's not new work by any means. But tell me a little bit about how each of you talk about your job and your role and the ways in which you explain it to folks who don't fully grasp it right away. Liza, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, sure. So I try to be visible. So we have product workshops and design studios every week. And when I first came on, I essentially introduced the role to the product and design org as like who I am, why am I here? I laid out sort of the state of research as it is today and kind of the problem areas, and then kind of a menu of what research ops can do and how we can help. just to really put it into context and like get some concrete examples of like, what is research ops? What do you do again? So a lot of it could look like this, or this is how you reach me. Here's this very silent research ops channel. I'm there listening. You can use it. And then kind of rinse and repeat, like, hey, it's me again. It's been a couple months. Last quarter, I spoke to you about these offerings. We still have those. Now we have these new things. Set up time with me. And doing, workshops on, hey, we just bought this tool. This is how it works. This is where you find the resources. Just kind of keep presenting yourself, the visibility, like being visible across the company and the teams. Setting up time with people, like just kind of reminding them that you're there and that you are a resource as often as needed, which I think is a lot.
I definitely would agree with that. I think I am probably one of the people who posts the most often in our product UX team channel, because I'm just like, hey, we changed something. It's going to help you. It's great. If you use it, you'll be so happy. Or sometimes they're like less fun, like, hey, we found out that like not everybody is filtering based on this thing that we're supposed to do. Here's a reminder, whatever. And I had a second thought that I forgot, so I'm going to mute and think about it.
Yeah, for me, it's actually really interesting because I came into this role as the only research person and was doing I was doing the research strategy, the research operation, like all of it, right? So it was really interesting to get to the point where I started scaling the team, because it's like, hey, we now have a research ops person, and people are like, well, what's the difference between like research and research ops? Like, what do you do? And what's this person do? So there's a lot of those conversations I would have where it's like, okay, if you have questions about how to do research, come talk to me. At one point we had a research strategist. I was like, talk to Glenn, right? Like if you want help with your methodology, you want help writing your research plan or doing your analysis, whatever, like that's a research task. If you have all that figured out, but you need to execute, then you go to research operations. And it's actually really interesting because we have 3 different Jira, like everything runs through Jira. Yes, we're crazy. The intake form is Jira Service Desk. Like that's research's job. Once it moves from that to our Kanban board, that's research ops's job. So it's like, it's our job to get things through the queue and get them into the right spot. But once you're in execution world, like then it's passed over to our ops team, and it's their job to make sure that things are moving through that process. So that's one way to sort of encapsulate like questions about how to do research. Talk to us, help actually doing and executing the research, talk to them. Yeah, people still mess it up sometimes. They'll go to our ops lead and ask them like, should I use this method or that method? And we're just like, go talk to Brad, like go talk to someone else about that. We didn't have too much trouble communicating the value of ops to leadership because they just kind of got it. They were just like, yeah, there's a bunch of different people doing research and we need to support them, and we can, make this more efficient. We can make it more scalable. We can decrease the noise introduced into the whole funnel and the whole process. Yeah, that's luckily a battle I didn't have to fight. But there's always that like, what is research and what is research ops, and what's the difference between these two things? And it's just, I think there's a quote from Bridget Metzler. It's just like, research ops is just doing all the things that make researchers' lives easier. And that kind of, as simple as it is, that really does sum it up. Like, we're not doing research. We're just doing the things that make research happen.
I did remember the other thing I was going to mention, which was referring to the 8 pillars of user research and saying like, okay, like, this one, like I almost broke it down into like 3 sub pillars within these pillars. I did a whole thing. There was a very large fig jam, but kind of explaining like, hey, we have a team of 3 in ops. We have 8 researchers. We have 100 PMs and designers. And so like, where do these different pieces fit? So like, Brad, what's the difference between research and research ops? We also have, what's the difference between research and design, and research and PM? And what's the difference between design and PM? It is all very messy sometimes, but referring to kind of that framework and saying, hey, here are the pieces that like ops is owning, here are the pieces that research is owning. And a lot of them we do have, overlaps, but that framework was really valuable to sort of be like, you can't do everything all the time.
That's great. I love that framework a lot. I dropped it in the chat for folks who are unfamiliar. Strongly recommend you check it out. This actually, so we've a theme that keeps coming up is there's a very critical human element to a successful research operations practice, and especially an ops first practice. Talk to me about how you are thinking of scaling that or making that sustainable as your practices grow and mature.
One thing, I mean, I'm not sure necessarily with the human element, if you're thinking of participants, if you're thinking of the researchers.
I'm actually thinking about the research ops people. So like right now, a lot of yeah.
We're
How are
humans
you?
too.
You are humans too. You're some of my favorite humans. Like how are you thinking about making your role sustainable as more and more research happens, as more people are conducting this work? Like how do you stay sane?
So I like to say that my goal for my job is to put myself out of a job. My goal is to make it so easy to find what you need to do, to automate the tasks, all of that, so that you don't have to ask me. And like, am I ever going to reach that? Probably not. Do I want to? Also, probably not, because I like having a job. But that is like finding those things that it's like, oh, people have asked this question multiple times. Maybe we should write it up. So, we can do what Brad was saying of like, just here's the documentation. This is so much easier than me remembering how to type it every time that somebody asks that question. So it's like opsing the ops team so that we're very opsy.
Yeah, I think I would never hear the end of it if I didn't mention automation. Rodrigo, our research ops lead, wrote an article on like how to, increase your impact through automation. And we have automation, like we run so much stuff through Slack where it's like, hey, like I get DM'd often. That's like, do you know you've got this thing to review and it's been 48 hours and you're like blowing up your SLA? Like, yes, I do. I know that. Everyone else on the team that's here, yeah, I know there are outstanding requests waiting for me. So like we get those, when people are in the middle, I think a week into their project, we get a little Slack bot that's like, hey, how's it going? Like, give us a quick update. And we'll like post those to different channels when you wrap up your research. So like a lot of these things that can be automated, we're automating them. And that's important to scale the human side of it, because then it frees you up to do more impactful work. It frees you up to do some of the stuff that Liza was talking about. Like, hey, show up at those all hands meetings and be like, I'm here. Here's an update of what we're working on. Here's, the strategic value that we're adding to the company. Like, yeah, as the amount of research you do, yeah, Rodrigo put in the chat. Thank you, Rodrigo. Yeah, as the amount of research your company does scales, like you can throw more people at the problem, or you can figure out how to be more efficient, and then that frees you up to, yeah, update your processes, update your documentation, do some analysis. Rodrigo built a lot of really cool reports in Jira so we can track where in our process people are getting stuck, so we know how to like focus our efforts as an operations team. So use automation, learn a little bit of code if you have to. Like it's the way as far as I'm concerned.
Liza,
Yeah.
how about you? Oh, go ahead.
I still get confused on which one to unmute. So yeah, I think automation is really important. We have sort of a unique situation at Clever. So the way that I think about it is like where the light lifts, try to get those done. Like there are going to be things that are going to take more time. I'm one person. So what are the things that can kind of keep the ball rolling of doing research now where I can work on this longer term, heavier lift stuff? But also I'm thinking about just, if you come to my talk later around, I think it's 3 p.m. Pacific. This enablement piece. So there's going to be trainings and workshops, and people can start using new methodologies and having a wider breadth and depth of research to kind of continue, well, until we have maybe headcount for researchers. But yeah, kind of in the meantime, like what can eliminate blockers, sort of, so that if you aren't there, nothing's going to fall apart, because we all should take a vacation. So keep doing research, and then work on the bigger stuff, and I don't know, patience.
Yes, patience is absolutely critical. That actually brings me to something that I think a lot of people are interested in hearing more about, which is really, how do you get started with an operations first practice? Like, if you were going to give sort of fairly generic advice to someone who's like, hey, I'm setting up a new practice and I think I want to go ops first, like, what are the first sort of 3 steps that you would recommend they take?
I'll just go, just because it kind of piggybacks on what I was just saying. First I would say, like, talk to people, see how they're doing it. Just, you're not them. And even if you assume that people are doing it one way, like, you're probably wrong. And that's good, because you want to know where you're wrong and you want to know what's happening. And then kind of essentially what I did was, like, focus on what's, like, the littlest, most annoying thing, because really a lot of my job is building these relationships and this trust to be like, I am here to help you. I'm going to make your life easier. If, at the end of the day, it should be a little bit easier than it was yesterday or last week. So kind of focus on what can be done now and maybe quickly to kind of get things moving. But do have your eye on those bigger pieces that will take longer and will probably have 7 different iterations from when you first solutioned it after having these conversations. You're like, actually, what we really need is this thing. And it's like, great, it's out there. It's like, ooh, but let's fix it. But meanwhile, like, all these other little pieces that were annoying have been solved, and there's value to operationalizing, no matter how small.
I totally agree with that. It's almost exactly what I was thinking, but like I think I would add, with those larger pieces that you're working on, getting feedback and like it's kind of like the classic product iteration of like build a skateboard, a bicycle, a car, rather than 4 wheels and then finding out that you didn't need a car. Because like that's how we built our research repository, and we very slowly added all of these things until we finally were able to do like that kind of like bigger release. But like, don't come and be like, hello, look, I have solved all of your problems. This is the first time you've seen it. It is perfect. You won't get it right. None of us are perfect. We're not going to get it right the first time. And like, getting feedback from all the people who are going to use it is going to make it so much better, and you're going to learn. And so those smaller steps that you can take towards those big problems are really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much I would change about what folks have said. I think, just to underscore, it's really important to educate folks, right? I think we often assume, as researchers and as research ops, practitioners and experts, that everyone has the same level of understanding that we do. Again, both of what research is and what research ops is. So it's like, yeah, I can do all the ops in the world, but if no one understands what research is and why and how we're doing it, like, one of the big mistakes I made at Auth0 was that I had that level of understanding at the leadership level, but the PMs and designers that were actually the ones responsible for doing this work had a varying level of understanding. So some teams were our research champions, and they were just like on top of all of our docs, came to all of our, all of our sessions, like they knew everything. And then we would hear 2 weeks after like something went live that they're like, oh yeah, we talked to like 3 customers and we just went with that. And you're like, how is this possible at the same company? So really making sure that you're approaching it top down and bottom up. and you're doing that sort of education part, that yeah, you may understand what research ops is. You may have a really clear picture of like, you've done your listening tour, you've heard the things, you've picked the 4 pillars out of the 8 that you're going to focus on, and you have your action plan. None of that matters if the people that you're working with, that you're supporting, don't understand what you're doing and why you're doing it.
That a great point, and actually gets to a question that I've been wanting to ask, which is, who are the really key allies as you're building an ops first practice? Like, what are the functions that, if you're going into a new org, you're like, I want to partner with that function, I want to partner with that function, or I need folks here. Like, how do you think about those key research ops allies? And are there like functions that you work with over and over again with there?
Honestly, it feels like everybody. I mean, like, obviously, there's the people doing the research. But then the more I think about it, I think about like, for participants, we want to, you know, partner with sales and with our customer success teams to make sure that we're able to find folks who have opinions about the work we're doing. We want to make sure we're partnering with marketing, so we're not like, I think this is a big thing where we're trying to make sure our marketing emails and our big sales, not so our big surveys don't conflict. So like, and then sometimes engineering, make friends with engineers, because if you need something built, you could really get somebody to do that on the side, maybe. I don't know. It really feels like it's everybody. You can have a mutually beneficial relationship with every department.
Yeah, the things I would add on top of that, legal, everyone is afraid of legal. Go be friends with your legal team. Like, get out in front of that. We were running our own research program through like Google Forms and whatnot, and then through Great Question. And probably 2 years into that, we finally launched a like public facing like auth0.com/research program that took coordination from design and marketing engineering and all that. Every time we send an email out, right, it's got to go through our marketing automation process to make sure that we're not sending 10 emails to one person in any given day. Like, the partnerships you need to build. I think we all focus on the people who do research, and it's like, those folks are important. Be friends with your procurement team, because you're probably going to want new tools, or you need to spend some money to pay for research participants, right? Like, there's 1,000 different ways that you can cut it. And yeah, sales, customer success, those folks are super important. I will like figure out who our chief legal whatever is and say, hey, here's the template we used from my last company for our like standard research agreement. Does this work for you? Can we like, do we need to make any changes? We're good. All right, cool. We're launching it tomorrow. Like, it's like, get out in front of those things as much as you can.
Yeah, I would second everything that's already been said. I think that, not to sound like a broken record, but I have found so many great insights and pieces of inspiration just from, we have these things, we used to call them JoJo's, because someone built this like bot on Slack that would just connect you with someone randomly at the company, and then you would talk to them. And there have been so many times in those conversations. So maybe it's like, oh, someone on the marketing team who's like, yeah, I'm dealing with this tool. And it's like, that sounds like something I'm doing. Let's just talk about our process of figuring problems out. And then, the ops team, I don't know that their operation, we have our customer success and sales ops team. They're doing all of this, and they're a whole team. So I've found a lot of value chatting with folks on that team about how they kind of operationalize their folks. And there's similarities in operations. So, and also legal. Yeah, definitely love them.
Yeah, I think about a lot in setting up research practices is this idea of like, I'm going to be little friend of all the world. Like, just like everybody in this company is now my best friend. They just don't know it yet. Fantastic. Well, we're coming to our last 10 minutes. So I think I've got some nitty gritty questions from the chat that people are like really interested in getting into some details. So first, are there any industry standard resources, or what resources would you recommend for really quickly bringing non-researchers into the fold? Like, there's so much out there right now about this stuff. Like, are there standardized things? What are you using? How are we making this work?
I wish this existed, and I'm going to like throw this idea out there that I pitched to the research ops board probably 3 years ago, and I myself have not made happen yet. I think we should develop a standard. I think we should, as researchers, as research ops people, basically say, all right, this is the template. This is the like open source research playbook. Customize it however you want based on your company and your team's specific needs. But there's a question on Slack of like, oh, I'm trying to plan out my career and like figure out what growth looks like. We don't have standards for these things, and I really think we should.
It feels like we're all kind of building those from scratch. Like we might be referencing some of the same templates. There's the research skills framework. There's the what is research op or what is research kind of thing. But we're all taking those and making them work for our little areas. And I totally agree. We should that should definitely be a thing.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I agree. It's like how many newsletters do I read and then click through hundreds of links, and then I realize that I have that same article open up in 3 different tabs because I need to learn it. I mean, yeah, we don't have it, and it would be very valuable.
Yeah. I love it. Opportunities. I think one thing we have not touched on, we've touched a lot on what's great about going ops first. And we've talked a lot about kind of the great things you get from that. What's the worst part? Like, what was the most painful part? What is the reason a company or an organization should not do this? Or what's been hardest? Where does it break down?
So this isn't necessarily what's been difficult. The thing that I've noticed, and this is partially, the changes that we're making that I talked about earlier. When you're running an ops first, or sometimes they like completely democratize research practice, the control you have over the research roadmap is basically non-existent, right? Like, I'm not the one doing the research, so yeah, I will give people advice, but at the end of the day, if they want to go do it, I just have to support that. So if you're going to go this route, and if you're going to invest so heavily in research ops, you're kind of giving up a little bit of control in the interest of, giving everyone a little bit of support, giving everyone a little bit of understanding, but you really lack that, like the focus, the deep understanding in specific areas. And yeah, the ability to, we haven't published a roadmap in 3 years because we haven't had a research roadmap, because I've had, one dedicated researcher in the past 3 years. So it's just like, yeah, the amount of control I have to say that we're doing these projects and we're going to deliver them on these dates, like, kind of doesn't exist. So now that we're shifting our focus over to staffing a research team, I can say, all right, here's the research we're going to do this quarter. We're going to deliver these things on these dates. Here are the initiatives that we're going to own ourselves versus the work that we're doing for marketing or for product or for whoever else. Like, that is the one thing that maybe I didn't even notice until making this transition. Then it's like, oh, yeah, I haven't been able to really deliver. Like, if I wanted some of these research projects to happen, I had to do them myself until we were able to hire a researcher. Then I had one person. So it's like, yeah, we get 1 or 2 studies per quarter that we can say are fully ours. It's been kind of crazy. So that is certainly, as much as I'm a fan of ops first, I'm a fan of democratization, there are definitely drawbacks.
Liza, Gaby, how about you?
I think I don't know if it's necessarily a drawback so much as just sometimes the less fun part is change management is hard. And I mean, like, there are things that you can do to make it easier. If it's not a big surprise, you're not, delivering something that nobody's ever seen before. You're explaining why you're making the decisions. You're making those decisions based on how people are actually working, not how you want them to maybe be working in an ideal world. That all helps with change management, but it's still hard. You still have to, tell people to switch tools, or that you're deprecating something, or that they have to add a step to their work that might feel more difficult. And that is a challenge for sure.
Yeah, maybe something I would add is sort of exercises in prioritization can be complicated. And so it's the most like diplomatic way I can say that. Um, and I also, as sort of a support, can get pulled from things because of a high priority project. And so like the sort of underlying understanding of my role is, yeah, great, cool, good roadmap, keep going, but we might just pull you away because something came up and we need you immediately. And that has happened. And it's like, okay, sort of drop everything or deprioritize. And then that can be disappointing to people if you're supporting a team or you're doing, it's like, hey, here are all the resources, like fly, I gotta go. But that's like it's positive and a negative. It's kind of like it's helpful that you're there, but it does lead to kind of, I guess, change management, expectation management, and all of the above.
Yeah, I love it. We are going to be closing down in just 1 minute so our keynote can come on. But I want to hear, as our last note on this panel, what's one thing you are super excited about for your operations practice in the next year?
Nobody's paid me to say this. It's a great question. We recently adopted it, and it's so helpful. It's so good.
I think for me, it's that renewed focus on supporting a research team versus supporting all the people who do research. We'll do both, but we're adapting a lot of our processes now because it's like we have a team of 4 folks that are fully committed to this versus having 40 folks that do this once per quarter.
I'd say enablement. So right now I'm working on building out a lot of trainings and workshops to get people kind of excited about different ways to do research. And also, great question, has really helped us in sort of getting the do research now piece underway. So now let's kind of build up our knowledge and skills.
I swear I didn't pay.
I know, they really did it.
I'm like tearing up. I'm like, this is so amazing. Thank you all so much. I learned a ton. I love Ops First. If anyone's got doubts, they should talk to the 3 of you. You've done incredible work setting up Ops First practices. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for everything that you have brought to us today. Loved talking to all of you. Thank you again.